17th meeting and the April 20th special voters meeting. So the November 17th was the regular meeting of the Voters Assembly, and then we had a special voters meeting to call a new teacher here at Trinity back in April, and those minutes are included as well. We can give you a couple of minutes to look at those if you'd like. Otherwise, the appropriate motion would be to approve the minutes for both meetings as presented. There is a motion, a second, and a second. Under discussion on the motion, on the motion, yes. Any questions on the minutes that are there? A number of us have glanced through them and they seem accurate. But I know you're maybe getting your eyes on them first. If a question does come up, you're welcome to ask any member of the council as the night goes on. But with that, we will ask for an aye vote if you're in favor of approving the minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Both of those meeting minutes are approved. Now is the reception of our new voting members and the signing of the registry. And I know we have a number of good members that are rejoining the Voters Assembly. So I think Linda, please rise. And Linda Bolgart is excited about getting going as a voter again. And then I also believe, you've got two. We got a good crew here. Roger Rodewald. Roger, here's Roger. He's going to be joining as the voters again. And we've got some of the Kulos here, correct?
Zach Cloco.
Zach.
Julianne Cloco.
And Julianne. So Zach, how old are you? I can ask them their age, right? Yeah, Zach, how old are you? 25 and 23. There you go. That brings our average age down nicely, which we're always in favor of. Oh, no offense, Linda and Roger, sorry. An appropriate motion then would be to receive the new members to the Voters Assembly. There's a motion and a second. This is where discussion comes up and you can ask tough questions or drill them a little bit. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And now, as a great tradition, we'll get to sign the registry of our voters throughout the almost 170 years of Trinity's history. If you could sign that, Roger, and then pass it on to Linda, and then back, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Next item is the President's Report, and for that we call up our President, Kurt Grubin.
Thank you, Joe. Just a few updates from Council is that during our last meeting, Council approved 5 sections of the Policy and Procedures Manual. The sections are listed there below: student physical privacy, electronic funds transfer, eligible education expenses, capitalization, and this is not about the kids and learning to do their spelling and their literature stuff, but capitalization and technology usage policies. Just a note on the technology usage policies, a couple things that were added was a few words of language indicating that we are requiring multi-factor authentication for staff at certain times during their use of electronic devices, and then also adding phishing, P-H-I-S-H-I-N-G, phishing awareness, also as part of that technology policy. So we passed those in Council. This was something that was worked on in and around late 2020 and 2021, and we discovered due to a conversation in the last few months that these had not been approved by Council, so we brought them in front of Council and got those approved. There are 2 other sections that we also approved, but to bring forward to you as the Voters Assembly, and that will be coming up in new business, so you'll see a little bit more about that. You do have in the half-size pamphlets here, you will see, if you want to look closely at this, you will see a note at the end of each section that says that it was approved by Council and the dates, so that's listed for those 5 sections. And the ones that are in new business are left blank at this point. Those will be potentially filled in at the end of this meeting, depending on our approval of that if we so decide to do that later in new business. New board members have been approved by council for the Board of Christian Day School. Tom Kelly was approved by the board as a recommendation brought forward from the school board. And then also the elders as listed, Dennis Barrow, Chad Hamilton, Tim Muth, and Jerry Terp are agreed to carry on to a second term. So they'll carry on and their roles will go until end of July in 2025. I'm remembering an old song about in the year 2025. Some of you might remember that from the 60s. And it's finally here. We're talking about it. That is it for my president's report.
Thank you, Kurt. We did not hand out a full policy and procedural manual to everyone that came across the front here, but if you are interested, you're welcome to grab one yet this evening, or at any time they're available to members of the congregation and to voters. The next item is number 6, and we are going to ask unanimous consent if it would be okay if we put the treasurer's report at the portion under new business just prior to the 2022-23 fiscal budget. Our treasurer's report relates to the new budget as well, so we'd like to hold that until we get into that discussion. There's nothing pending before that that's spending money, so the treasurer's report won't make a difference at that point. Seeing no objection to that, we'll move into council recommendations, and again, call up Kurt.
The elders brought forth their recommendation for membership changes. Those are listed right after the special voters meeting minutes. So hopefully we're following an order here, listed membership changes at the top. So you can look at those quickly here, and I would entertain a motion to approve of those membership changes.
It's about 8 pages in your white agenda document, membership changes at the top. Again, the appropriate motion would be to approve the membership changes as reflected on the document. Someone so move. There's a motion, second. And a second. Great discussion. Any questions on any of those membership changes? Seeing none, all those in favor then of approving those changes, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Those membership changes are approved. Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. And in the very next page, just on the back side of what you were looking at, if you were looking at the membership changes, the church council is recommending the endowment fund allocations, as you can see listed here, totaling $50,181. And you can see them split up into 7 sections. The first 6 are specific locations, and the remaining funds that were not specifically allocated are designated then towards capital improvements at the discretion of church council. And that's in the amount of the $11,000 and some few odd dollars there.
So the appropriate motion would be to approve the endowment fund request as presented by the church council. A motion, a second. Second, go. Under discussion? Tim.
The 50,000, that's rolled in these funds only and not capital?
That's correct, yeah. So there's an endowment committee, and then once a year they look at, and it's just the growth of the fund. You don't spend the principal. It's a small portion. You do see Chuck is here, yeah. Chuck is the chair of the endowment. Right. Chuck, the question just was that we're not spending the principal on the endowment. And does this even cover the earnings in a sense?
We use a 3-year rolling average, 12 quarters, and then from that we multiply it by 4%. That's the number we use. We're only taking out 4%. In 2021, our account grew by 13-point-something%, and our appropriations were only 4%. So we're very conservative in what we're extracting for use, and all of them have to meet the criteria that are listed in the endowment appendix, which we make sure that they all do, and That's why the last number then is just the extra, and that goes to church council discretion.
Thank you, Chuck. Other questions? I think, again, at our last board meeting, there was a question about endowments. I don't see that member here, but, again, this is just a good reflection of what we do on an annual basis. And part of that is the faculty, staff, funding that we provide for advanced degrees. I think that was the question, if we had anything in place to support our staff and those types of considerations. And that is part of the overall endowment. So again, the motion on the floor is to approve the endowment fund request as approved by the church council. All those in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and those are approved.
Thank you, Joe. Moving on to letter 7C, the election of church council. The board or church council recommends the following members in the following positions to serve for the next 3 years. For Vice President, Dave Jablonski. Just a side note here, this would be Dave's second term. He served in the at-large position in the previous 3 years. Kim Shattuck then as Education Coordinator. Ron Meyer as Properties. He would be in his second term. He took over the last year after the previous person in that role moved out of state. And Zach Zeman for the at-large member. Normally, we approve for 5 names to come forward. There's a routine of 5 out of the 15 board members or council members being voted on. You'll notice that the finance coordinator is still pending. We have an individual that is, and Pastor has been talking to this individual who is interested, we believe, and is waiting to see the counting procedure on a Sunday morning. So if you watch really closely at Chris's office, you can see who that is when you walk in. But with that being aside, we're going to allow that person to not go on the ballot because that person has not yet agreed to be put on the ballot. And so if that person says yes, then we'll bring that to the attention at the next Voters Assembly meeting in September. So I would just ask for a motion, Mr. President, to approve the election to church council of the 4 names that are listed in those particular positions.
Is there such a motion? There is a motion and a second. And a second. Under discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of those recommendations then for elections to the church council, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Those are approved. Mr. President.
Thank you. And then also just want to thank you to Dave and Kim and Ron and Zach for your willingness to serve in these upcoming 3 years. And in addition, would like to just extend a thanks to the members who are stepping away from council, and that would be Mr. Leipom, Joe, who has served for 2 years as our vice president. Ramona Nimmer, I think, is here. Thank you, Ramona, for serving as the education coordinator. And then also to Ken Howard, who served as our finance coordinator. I don't believe he's able to be here tonight, but we thank you to those who have served in that way. So thank you very much. Moving on, we have a request to approve 2 new members for the Lutheran Cemetery Board of Trustees. Those are, as a new member, Julianne Cloco, and then also Sue Cloco filling a vacancy from a previous year that was filled with a member. So we have both of those names in Julianne and Sue to help us out in the Lutheran Cemetery Board of Trustees. So I just ask for a motion to approve them in that role.
So there's a motion and a second.
Second.
Thank you. Under discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor of those recommendations indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and those members are approved.
Thank you, Sue and Julianne.
Right.
And we're on to new business.
Sure.
This may be a hand right back to me. So in new business here, we have a policy and procedures manual update that we'd like to bring forward. And this relates in two areas, and I'll be calling on Jenna to help explain some of these. But I'd like to, I can explain a bit of it. In your packets, yes, this one that Joe is holding, it's a double-sided print and a little bit smaller print. That packet has in front of you the first approximately 10 or 11 pages are the recommended call committee procedures. The following pages, about the same length, are the previous call committee procedures that would be replaced with these new. And then there is a school choice program policy, and I'd like to call attention to a specific wording on that. If I could borrow this. It's right in the back. For the school choice policy, on the very back, there is a change of wording that we are proposing, and you'll see it listed there, indicating under number 8, limitation, and the policy there reads, as we are proposing it, Trinity's participation in the WPCP will be reviewed annually so that the amount of WPCP voucher students each year does not exceed 25% of the student population. That's a change from a funding percentage in the past of 20%. And I think that's about the point where my knowledge runs out of these two policies. And I would ask that Jenna just give a little explanation about the call committee procedures as well. Jenna?
So the call committee procedures that you see are altered because we have separated out the call committee procedure for a teacher from that of a principal or a pastor. And so if you take a look at the document in front of you, the initial pages are the changes that we are recommending as a council. And then in the back part, you'll see that the older policies from the previous policy and procedure manual are in italics. So you'll notice that Alan Voss went through and reworked these, and so the reason that it's all in slanted language is because he essentially rewrote the policies by clarifying language and by adding lines of the bylaws to indicate where this information is coming from for each of the call procedures. And so the primary difference that you will note will be in that language, but then also in the procedure for the calling of a teacher only, there has been a provision put in that gives the call committee the autonomy to bring forward one name, which has been something that has come up frequently in our meetings and in our discussions and in our call procedures, specifically for a teacher, which didn't used to be an issue, but now that we have quite the significant teacher shortage, it has become much more of an issue. And so essentially what this call committee procedure allows us to do is it just gives us that flexibility to bring the voters one name, but also to bring the voters more than one name. And so that was really the goal of separating that out from principal, pastor, and music director, where that requirement for more than one name, according to the policy and procedure manual, would stay in place for those other positions. And so if you're looking for primary differences, that's what you're going to see. The rest of it that you will see that is different is in cleaning up of redundancy and in language. And so you can feel free to read through that and ask any questions that you may have.
Questions right away, I can roll into the next issue and come back at her.
Okay, so you explained the first question I had, which was, what are the primary differences in the call procedures? With regard to the school choice language change.
Here, let's just stay focused on the call procedure just for a second. Yep. Any other questions on the call procedure that Jenna can further give background on? Again, if something comes up yet, please raise your hand along the time here. Okay, then let's put Tim on the call procedure.
When you're saying the procedures, you're going back to the Constitution, the bylaws, and changing that as well, correct?
So what Alan did is he put this under the umbrella of the original bylaws. So in the bylaw, the language is, I think it says that the call committee will work with a slate of candidates. And so underneath the slate of candidates, he narrowed it down to either a candidate or candidates. So it was never in the Constitution, it was always a bylaw. And so he's operating within that within that structure and updating the procedure itself while maintaining the integrity of the bylaw.
The bylaws, I'd ask you to double check that, because I went back to the Constitution for the last 12 years.
Sure.
And it says that there's supposed to be candidates, plural, in that.
Right, and you, where did Kirk go? You talked to Alan about
It
that.
doesn't say candidate, it says candidates, so I think the Constitution and or the bylaws need to be updated to go along with this.
As I talked to Alan about this very thing, I brought up that discrepancy, or I wouldn't say discrepancy, but the potential discrepancy, knowing that for the teacher call committee, we're indicating you could bring one name. Yeah, in the bylaws, it does say candidates with the plural, and I asked Alan about that, and he said that the fact that it says multiple, has multiple as a plural, doesn't require us in an individual policy to state that. He said this not a contradiction. That was his words to me. And
You know better than I would, but you know, in the hierarchy of organizations, though, the Constitution is at the top, the bylaws are underneath that, and of course, the procedures are on that supporting the Constitution. And where there's, to me, where there's a plural in the bylaws, that means more than one.
yeah, I understand your point, and I understand that I'm trusting Alan's indication that we are within the bounds of that.
Yeah, I just wish they would update that though for clarification. I mean, to me, you know, he was obviously no better than I would, but from a common sense standpoint, S is plural, means more than one.
At this point, you know, that's part of the reason for bringing forward this, in a sense, to clarify that we can do this as a individual name. I think in the next year or two, we may be taking a closer look at the bylaws and the Constitution for those types of things, and that would certainly be called out if that was an issue at that point. That's where we see it at this point.
Other questions on the call committee process proposal? And let's go over to the voucher proposal here. Question?
Yes, so for the school choice, is there, could I give an explanation as to why the change is being proposed?
Right, so this was another one that we thought was interesting because the policy and procedure manual was something that we expedited during our last accreditation cycle 3 years back. And there was a voters meeting right around that same time that it was actually Alan that stood up and recommended that we make this language change, and then somehow it never made it into the policy and procedure manual. And I think it was just because of the variability of the budget year to year would make staying within that 20% challenging without also having a student number. So doing 25% of the student population is a very concrete number year to year because I have a full student population, 25%. Whereas 20% of our overall budget is a much more dramatic variance year to year. And the voucher seats have to be done right now. So they're decided in May. And so before we can even vote on the budget, they already have to be in place. So I have a little bit of a better idea of what our student population will look like to stay within those guidelines, was kind of the initial, you know, let's take a look at that. And I think when Alan originally was doing some of that math too, we were looking at what is feasible within the realm of our budget, of knowing that if it went away, could we still survive? I think was part of that as well.
Well, and so back when we first entertained the concept of joining the choice program, this was something that I brought forward and was very passionate about, because I have seen many churches get drunk on choice dollars to the point where they are so dependent that they could not ever survive if those choice dollars go away. So I understand now that the explanation,
Sure, so would you recommend 20% of the full operating budget or of the school operating budget? Meaning you want to adjust it for like full organization?
I guess I'd like a dollar cap and the student either or
Sure.
to be a limitation.
Yeah.
And it's been a long time since I looked at the math of, school
Right.
budget versus, because I don't know how it's calculated, but it made, the 20% made sense to everybody back when we first did it because of the dollars and the,
Right.
whatever budget was being weighed against it.
Right, and what will happen is annually what happens is as state funding per public school pupil increases, the voucher amount per student increases as well slightly. So the amount that we get per pupil goes up just a little bit each year, and so that would mean that we might have to, if we set a dollar amount like that, that would probably have to be annually reviewed then, correct? Because if that number keeps going up, potentially,
And if that's what we have to do, then
Right.
I think we have to do that.
Right.
Because, again, you can find yourself in 5 years to a point where, you've limited the participants to 25%, but because of that funding going up every year, you could be approaching 50% of your budget. And now they throw some requirement out that says, hey, we're not gonna do it, and everybody gets squishy because they see the dollars going away by actually getting us out of it.
right? So that would probably take some work on Andy's part to see what that amount should be based on. I mean, I think we'd have to go with operating budget. Our school budget doesn't take up enough of a percentage.
Right.
That'd be a pretty small number. Yeah, I'm gonna need someone with a little bit more math prowess to take a look at that.
But we actually don't even have a motion on the floor yet for the proposed changes here either way. So I think Kurt's gonna move to approve the call committee process. You wanna do that?
Yeah, our thought is to separate these out so we can just do it one at a time and make it a little bit cleaner in that regard. So I will move that we approve for the call committee procedures as they're written in the folder.
Is there a second to that? Cool, thank you. Under discussion on the call committee procedures, I appreciate Kevin's concern, checking with the Constitution with that. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. That is approved. Now, under the school choice program, again, it would be appropriate to have a motion to approve them.
I so move.
Is there a second? And there's a second. It's not on the floor, so then under discussion, the body could entertain an amendment. We can have this continued discussion. I think the only concern that I would share is that if we don't have the specific, then we don't really have the understanding of what number we're going to use when Jen has to make some decisions. I don't know how that plays out calendar-wise.
Right, and that's a lot of what I was thinking about too. The timeline just is not favorable because we open up seats and then by May we have to close them down and kind of make these final decisions. And none of these things happen when we have concrete numbers on a voted budget or on, really even on perfect enrollment numbers for the following year. So there's always a little bit of gray area when you're running off of a completely different calendar. I'm thinking through that percentage does still have to, just for my purposes, I have to have some sort of a number that I know that I'm working with seats. Because the other thing is, what really matters is obviously serving our families who already have one, making sure that they don't get one and then we take it away. So it would be more limiting new families coming in with the voucher program, which is much easier to do. And so I just have to make sure that I do have a really clear number so I know exactly how many seats I have available that falls under both perhaps the 25% of the population and or the limit. So I wish I could say I knew exactly what that would look like.
Okay.
So if we vote against this revision, they'll just stay the same as the 20%. I agree with what's being discussed back here.
Right, and I agree with those concerns too. My only other side concern is that I do feel like we need to go back in some voters' meeting minutes. What my other sidebar concern is that I feel pretty confident that the 25% was approved by the voters a few years back, and that's the other part of my concern is that when Alan Konetsky put together the policy manual, that he didn't catch that revision in a previous voters meeting. And so when I saw this in the policies and procedures manual that came by the council, I was a little taken aback because I think we voted on this already a few years back. And I could be mistaken about that, but I don't think that I am.
You're not. And if Alan were here, we would confirm that because he made the motion. So I mean, we can find it in the minutes. And that's what we've been operating since then. So I think it's a mistake in the manual. So if we want to adjust that and change that later, I think we can, given those concerns. But I think right now, we're kind of stuck.
Yeah, I think we should, you know, like I said, that
So,
was
you know, your consideration.
Well, how do I resonate a dollar limit then? I mean,
Right.
because I want both. And I understand the difficulty, so I don't really have a good proposal, especially not knowing what reality is.
Right.
So, I mean, the problem is that money takes a dive for 1 year. All of a sudden, we have to cut that back. And this program, you can't get in and out of easily. And then you're just coming up with a number. She has to have a number ahead of when we know those things. And maybe it's the year after, or maybe it's kind of like delay that. I'm just thinking out loud.
But right now, though, we do have a number based on the current procedures, correct? And we're thinking it's a 25% of income.
Correct. Yeah.
So if we.
So when I go in to put in seats, I have to be careful to make sure that not.
Well, the procedure, there was a mistake in the manual. So, and I was there too, and I know Alan made, because we had this discussion, how do we get students? How can we confirm how many students we're going to get? So it was 25% of the student population, and we've been working off that since that voters meeting in the gym. And I know it's there, it'll be in the minutes. It just didn't make it into the procedural manual, it's a mistake. So the question is, do you keep that right now, 25% of the student population, or do you say that either or, and then you look at the numbers? I think the numbers will be okay right now, I'm not sure. But right now we're stuck because we can't make those decisions.
Well, Jen, if 25% is the maximum, what are we at now? Are we at 25% or are we below that?
No, we're right there.
We're right on
25.5%, something like that, when it comes to when you do the actual math. Yeah, that's where we've lived for the last, I don't know, it's been probably 4 years.
The number of students is at 25% right now?
Yes. And so the motion was really to correct the manual to reflect the voters' minutes.
Do we have any idea what the dollar percentage has been?
A voucher right now for a student is around $8,000 per student.
And so back to 25, and put that into our overall budget of 1.6. Is that 21%? It's less than, yeah, it's right around 20%. Right.
20%.
Yeah.
That may be why I don't know that it's not. I know that she's correct, and we've been operating at 25%. That's what we've been operating on. Heard that a voters' assembly meeting, it was a mistake when they did. We realized they went through years and years to put this policy manual together. But probably quite a few more mistakes, but that was to correct that. Now, if we want to change that, we can. But said, let's look at, we'll have an answer by that for the September voters meeting. Right now, we just correct to reflect what we voted out in the past. And then we figure out what that number is, that if it's 20%, if it's whatever it might be. Because really nothing's going to change between now and because it's already done.
Right, and if you have it by the September voters meeting, that gives me ample time, because we don't open up seats until January. And so if we go, okay, well, we're at our maximum based on the percentage of the budget, then I just don't open any more seats. Our vouchers don't have our vouchers don't need. So if the September timeline would be fine in terms of how the program operates.
We do have a committee for and maybe you guys can look into that keeps an eye on the voucher program, and they could, I think, easily incorporate that as well.
I'm willing to wait, but I want to come back to it because I think it's very important for our future.
I'll just make a motion then to table this discussion and until the next voters assembly, we'll have a council meeting prior to that. We'll be able to look at this more closely, obviously look at that policy that we already voted on in the meantime and act according to that previously set policy. So that's my motion to table this discussion until we can come back.
There's a second. All those in favor to non-table the motion. All those in favor of tabling, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. This is tabled.
And just one other question. I know that a lot of work is going to be done to prepare for this. It'd be great if you guys can show your work. And I'll be willing to help look at it too if that's of any benefit.
Thank you. Yeah, because I think there's understanding and agreement as to what we're trying to get to.
Sure.
Again, we're not discussing any further, but we actually have one of the most conservative and aggressive policies in regard to the voucher program at Trinity, which I think is good.
I know, I appreciate it.
Right. Yeah. Next page.
So we move from that to the bylaws. The church council is bringing forth a recommendation to change one of the bylaws. I'll give some background and then I'll read this. The background is that because we have changed our fiscal year to, is it July 1 through July 1? Thank you. From July 1 to July 1, because our fiscal year has changed, we had a placement of our voters' assembly meetings in an odd time of year relative to that budgeting, or relative to that fiscal year. It has been, and it is listed in the bylaws as being in September, November, and May. And so we are proposing to change that wording. As a note, a procedural note, when you're changing a bylaw, it requires a 2/3 vote, but it also requires that you read the proposed changes at a voters' assembly meeting and then come back to the next meeting for that vote on that topic. So tonight is just a matter of bringing this to your attention. You have the wording in front of you. It's at the top, Church Council Recommendation Amendment to Bylaws, and it's Article 1. I'll go ahead and read this. Article 1, Voters' Assembly, Section B, Meetings of the Voters' Assembly. Regular meetings of the Voters' Assembly shall normally be held 3 times a year, period. We have struck out the words that are struck out. The times and places of the regular meetings shall be established by the Church Council and shall be announced at the services of the 2 Sundays prior to each meeting. Special meetings of the Voters' Assembly may be called by the President, the Church Council, or the pastors. A special meeting shall be announced at the service of the 2 Sundays prior to the meeting or at the services of the Sunday prior to the meeting, if written notice is also delivered at least 5 days prior to the meeting. The notice of any special meeting shall describe the purpose of the meeting. So you can see that we struck the words during the months of September, November, and May and left it unspecified so that we can choose the months of the year when we think make most sense to hold these meetings. Our position on this would be that we would go September, January, and May. They're each separated by 4 months. I love the math of that. It sounds great. But that also gives us more regularity to our discussions as a congregation.
Purpose tonight is just to bring it to your attention and to read it for the first time for the voters' assembly. Any questions that occurred tonight? none, then again, we come before the next voters' assembly meeting for a required 2/3 vote majority to make that change to our bylaws. Yes.
Yes.
Why not change it to September, January, and May in the bylaws?
The question is, why not change it to September, January, and May and specify it?
Specify it, yeah.
Pastor?
This is a recommendation from the South Wisconsin District, but they are recommending for all congregations, just because of situations that occurred with COVID and other situations, they're recommending that all congregations do this. That they don't put months, so it gives some flexibility with that. That's the reason for it. So this is actually a recommendation from the district, South Wisconsin District.
Other questions?
So it counted up to 1 A. I mean,
Pastor Zig would know that. He is the chairman for the
District Constitutional Committee.
District Constitutional Committee. But that was a recommendation from Pastor Zig from the committee at the South Wisconsin District. So you can ask him, but that, I don't know.
just to play devil's advocate here, right? Because if you don't specify, there's no, I mean, you could have 3 meetings back in a row, right? You know, September, October, November, and then do one for the rest of the year.
Okay.
And that just becomes a concern, and I think that's why it's specified here. So, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't need you to know the answer to why not specify.
Pastor Mack?
That would be impossible because we wouldn't have the information September, October, November, because information and the information we need for forming budgets and all of that takes place. A lot of work takes place before a voters' assembly meeting, and a lot of time has to go from between. When we had September, November, there was really no reason to have a meeting in November. We needed to get it closer to May. So, I mean, and plus there's the trust factor. You can elect us or not elect us if we. I mean, I don't see that happening. I don't think it's possible for it to happen given the information that has to be voted on at the time of the year it has to be voted on.
We also have the opportunity to investigate this a little bit and make sure we have exactly those words, that recommendation from district through Pastor Zick, so that can accompany this at the next time. I appreciate the comment so that we can be more forthright with our action.
Additional questions or thoughts? And again, don't hesitate to share those over the next couple of months if you have any additional ideas or thoughts there. Next item.
The next item on the agenda is for you, Joe.
The Church Council, we are blessed that Trinity Lutheran Church is going to be celebrating 170 years in 2023 and 175 years in 2028. And so the council is recommending that we approve the creation of a 170th and 175th combined anniversary committee, which would have the goal of exploring and planning ceremonial events, mission-focused program enhancements, infrastructure improvements, expansion goals, and funding proposals to be accomplished in the period of 2023 through 2028. And the committee would be comprised of 9 voting members, of which we would be seeking interested individuals. The pastors, the cantor, and the school principal would serve as ex officio, and the committee would have a starting kind of fund of $3,000 for incidental expenditures as they move forward on creating plans for our 170 and 175th anniversary. So with that, I would move that that recommendation be adopted. Is there a second? Second. Under discussion. Under discussion again would be that we're looking forward to at least 9 members stepping forward and saying they'd like to serve on the committee. We're looking for people from both the ceremonial aspect of what we should be doing for our anniversary and for potential, capital expansion plans or ideas as to how we might recognize that. Everything from our bells to who knows what. And that's the other idea. If you have thoughts of things that we could do in celebration of either of those anniversaries, please bring those forward to the council or to the committee. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that is approved. Now we will flow into the treasurer's report and the capital, or the budget proposal for the next year. You do have information from Andy Rint in front of you. That's the large document. What do we call this paper again? I haven't said that for a long time. Legal paper, there you go, thanks. The legal size sheet, and also the Trinity Lutheran Church and School document that you have here. And Kurt's going to introduce Andy.
So I think it starts with.
Yeah. So Andy is not able to be here, but he is, and he did not put me in charge of this message, so you're welcome. Andy has put together a YouTube video that will guide through your handout here. He'll go slide by slide and explain this very well. I watched this last night, and it's very well explained. So with no further ado, let's introduce Andy Rint.
We don't think Andy's out of the boat, do we?
So then go to his email.
Jen actually working on this. So this is our Promethean board, correct?
It is.
This is an investment that the church and our membership have made in technology upgrades to the school. So how many of these do we have in the school?
We have 11, so we replaced all of the existing Promethean boards with projectors, with these boards. 9 of the 11 are on mobile carts like this, so they can be moved from location. So this one sits in the music room. They can be connected wirelessly or hardwired in. Each classroom is also equipped with a document camera, and we also purchased DVD players that hook right up to these as well. So much of that funding also came through the first round of Mead funding, which was really funding for schools to support there's necessity for virtual learning, so you could do a lot of technology purchases with that. So they are already used a lot in our classes.
Yeah, it's pretty good technology invested in, and the classrooms are definitely putting them to use. And the students enjoy the opportunity to have connections with technology.
Right, we have Chromebook sets in every classroom, so the students can actually share their screen as easy as the teacher can, so they can do student presentations from their own student devices, which is really nice.
Ready?
Thank you. We're ready. We did not. Fine.
Thanks for coming tonight, and thanks for your patience in accepting maybe a little bit more of a non-standard work program.
It's using technology, makes things so much easier.
Well, I'm sorry I'm not able to answer your question. I hope that I'm able to provide enough information for you to come to the meeting and vote yes to the recommendation.
Yeah, no, I find it. Yeah. No, I don't know, yeah. It should be, you should just have to.
Before we get into the details of why we're arriving at the
Lois, you're gonna grab up, take that laptop and
Yeah, I have the screen share. The audio is, yeah, the audio is typically more reliable when you put it there.
good, sure, yep, it's a good idea. We were just wondering if it was like a third or fourth grade room. We're actually gonna allow them to get this working, and we're gonna move forward with a report of council. Here. So this will go back to number 9 on the back page of the agenda. Our first report will come from our Board of Elders. Jeff.
Hi, and thanks for
Jump back to this. Got it.
your patience in accepting maybe a little bit more of a non-standard work program presentation for this year's voters meeting. Well, I'm sorry I'm not able to be there in person. I hope that I'm able to provide enough information for you to confidently either vote yes to the recommendation in front of the voters assembly or to amend it confidently. Before we get into the details of why we're arriving at the recommendation that we are as a council to the voters assembly, I just wanted to get those recommendations in front of you so that you have them in your mind while you're reviewing these details. The first is the approval of our current fiscal year projected deficit, which is currently $24,155. And it's approving that deficit and funding for that deficit through undesignated assets, essentially the state gifts that have been given previously in the past. I truly believe that this is a worst case and that there's a puncher's chance that we may actually balance our budget this year, which is a fantastic thing that we should, as a congregation, should be extremely proud of. And the second thing that I want to recommend for the voters assembly tonight is the approval of our fiscal work program, which is really a spending of $1.77 million, which is an increase of 7.3% over and above prior year. Details we'll share in just a minute. And a corresponding deficit of $74,960. The first piece of background information that I'd like you to have as a voter is our current cash position as a congregation. It currently sits at $824,718, which is a very strong position for the congregation to be in to fund both its mission and its capital improvement campaigns. The sources of this cash are essentially threefold. The first, almost half, 46.8%, comes from gifts, either given weekly through the plate or in one-time events such as this evening. The second would be through dedicated funds, 27.9%, so almost a little over a quarter of our gifts come as dedicated funds, those given similarly as the previous gifts, but with dedications to them, that they must be spent in a particular way to fund the mission of Trinity. And the last, about a quarter, is a loan balance of about $212,000 that was taken back when we did our roof renovation project in 2015 or so. We have managed to maintain this loan because of the flexibility that it affords our congregation. And when we look at these three sources of cash, the 46.8% of undesignated gifts is an important piece of information you should remember when we look at our budget proposal. The second piece of background that I'd like you to have is our historical deficit that we have undertaken over the past 10 years. As you can see, the gray line, our deficit, has shrunken significantly while we have seen significant growth in our income. That's the blue line. It's worth noting that as we see the blue line increase over the past 10 years, we've taken measures to slow the increase of the orange line, which are expenses. And you can see the gap between those two lines shrink quite significantly into this year. We have had to make many difficult decisions over the past 10 years to manage expenses and reduce our overall deficits. with the fact that our cash balance remains high, it is something that gives us good confidence that we can act aggressively in our budget this year. As a background point, I wanted to share the sources of our income and the role that school vouchers play in our funding. That's the pie chart at the bottom. As you can see, 18.7%, the gray slice of the pie, of our current funding comes through school vouchers, and 81.3% comes through funding through other member giving and tuition. We do monitor the role that voucher funding plays in our overall funding and do take steps to ensure that we are not overly dependent on state funds. While voucher funding does make up a decent chunk of Trinity funding, it is worth noting that non-voucher funding has increased 10% this year, and that the reduction in our deficit this year is truly caused by a stewardship of our membership and good expense management. Taking that same view to break down our expenses, you can see that the overwhelming majority of our spending relates to the salary and benefits of our great and faithful staff in the church and school. They are a true asset to our congregation, but I must say that over the past 10 years, we have struggled to maintain competitive salary and benefits for them. The South Wisconsin District provides good detail on what appropriate compensation should be, taking into effect cost of living, their seniority, the role that they play, and academic accreditation. When we compare ourselves to this standard, we are currently at 74% of that standard. So we must continue to address this as a board society. This past winter, our day school board passed a 7% increase in average tuition, with the stated goal that this increased funding be used to address faculty and staff compensation. If there is one piece of information I want you to have from this slide, it's that our shortfall to the South Wisconsin District guidelines is not small. To be at 74% of district guidelines means that we are approximately $250,000 short of where we should be in terms of faculty and staff compensation. We won't solve this problem overnight, but it is a continued focus of our Financial Review Committee that we improve our overall position relative to this guideline. So with those 3 points in mind, I direct your attention either to this slide or to the handout which has been given to you, which provides detail on our work program recommendation of $1.77 million in 2023. The key points that we'd like you to know are that we are proposing an increase to our salary scale next year of 3%, and also recommend that we add a 16th year to our salary scale. So that for salaried staff, we are not only increasing pay for an annual increase to our scale, but also to ensure that they are all rewarded through increased seniority on that scale, no matter how many years of service they have in the industry. This is, as I said before, only a small step towards reducing our gap to district guidelines, but this does move us from 74% to 77% of their overall recommendation. When you combine our compensation recommendation with conservative assumptions for facilities maintenance and curriculum needs, partially driven by the inflation that we all see in the marketplace today, we are increasing our work program by $121,000. From a funding perspective, we are projecting that with a 5% increase in plate giving and a 7% increase in tuition, that income would increase by $70,000 in 2023. So by combining these two numbers for the work program and for income, we would see that our annual deficit would increase by $50,000 from $24,000 to just under $75,000. So with that recommendation in mind, I'd like to give a few last points on why we are voting to not only approve a deficit, but also an increase to our deficit, given the improvement that's been made over the past 10 years. First, I reiterate the strong cash position that we are in, and that it affords us the flexibility that we need to do what is right for our staff. And second, that the problem of staff compensation extends not just to our current staff, but also to the future future staff that we would like to bring to Trinity in the long term. Being able to have a great staff is what sets Trinity apart, and making sure that we can continue to recruit great staff is very important. Lastly, if you remember the sources of our cash from a few slides ago, I want you to be aware of how much of that is, quote, freely available cash. That is not tied to a particular project or to a bank loan that we would eventually repay. That freely available net cash is currently at $376,000. So when you compare the size of our budget deficit of $74,950 to the freely available net cash of $376,000, you'll see that we currently sit on about 5 years of available net cash as a congregation. That is a fairly strong budgeting position to be in relative to where we have been in years past, and gives us confidence that we are in a good position to increase the size and scope of our work program next year. So with that in mind, I would leave you with the recommendation that is before the voters, and that is to approve the 2023 work program of $1.77 million as presented. Unfortunately, I wish that I could be there to answer any questions that you may have, but I hope that with the informed council members here, as well as armed with the background information that's been provided, that you can approve the recommendation placed before you come. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you all in church on Sunday.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, that was some good information, a lot of information though, but it does reflect the information that's in the documents that you were, am I on? Oh, it's going through there, that's okay. I think people can hear. It does reflect the information that's on the numerous documents that we presented to you tonight. The first item that we should address would be approving the current treasurer's report. So again, we held off on that from the start of the meeting. That really is best reflected on the legal sheet. It is the first, or all but the final 2 columns to the right. That gives you our current treasurer's report in regard to the statement of income and expenses. As Andy shared, right now it is looking as if we will end the fiscal year, which is June 30th, with a $24,155 deficit. That's the number, the third column, or the fourth column, excuse me, under the fiscal year information. So the appropriate motion would be to approve the treasurer's report as presented. A motion, and is there a second? And a second. Thank you. Questions then on the treasurer's report. This is the existing treasurer's report as of May 26, 2020. As Andy said, we should be excited and thankful for the position that we're looking at here, but we're sharing a message as well over the next couple weeks that a potential balanced budget is within sight, and we just ask that everybody give that their thoughtful prayer and consideration as they might help us to accomplish a balanced budget by the end of June 30th. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion then to approve the treasurer's report indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. That takes us then to the first recommendation for tonight. And I believe we're going to approve that if there is a deficit, that deficit would be covered under the undesignated assets. So on Andy's first page, the initial recommendation is that we approve funding the projected deficit of $24,155 with the undesignated assets under our cash reserve. So that makes sense. That's typically what we do if we have a deficit. Again, the appropriate motion would be then to approve that proposal to cover the projected deficit with undesignated assets. There's a motion and a second under discussion on that. Tim.
Do we know what the total balance of our undesignated funds are?
So that's what Andy showed us on that chart. It's in here. Additional questions on that recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation that we cover the projected surplus? We don't have to have a surplus, remember that. But if there is a surplus, we'd cover that with the undesignated funds. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, and so now we are on to the program of work for 2023. And this is the information that Andy shared with us. It is a proposal that seeks to increase the budget by just over 7% and to approve a budget with a proposed deficit of about $70,000. So the motion would be to approve that table or that program of work. Motion and a second. Now under discussion on the budget, the proposed budget. Questions, thoughts? Tim?
I guess it's nice to have the $375,000 cushion that we have and have a potential of $25,000 deficit this year conservatively. Another $75,000 next year, that takes us down. Karen and I belong to congregations over the years where, quite honestly, this kind of thing went on for years and years. And I hate to say this, but they had trees out in the lobby, not to scare people, to pay utility bills. Utility bills couldn't get paid. Continuous having a deficit spending like this without looking at what's the projected undesignated funds, which are hard to project. How are we going to cover that? I see that we have, $800 and some thousand dollars in our checking account. But I just hate to keep eating away at that. I guess maybe things need to be looked at from the economic standpoint, national economic standpoint, the good times, and obviously, potentially, the not so good times coming up with the recession coming up and the inflation. The 5% in giving, that was shown, I guess not on the side of here. I'd like to know how that projection was made. Was made based on the ties and not the ties, not the budget, the pledges.
Right.
The pledges, I don't know if the pledges of those that did pledge, if they went up 5%, or if that is based on the annual giving has gone up over the last, say, 10, 15 years on a 5% basis. But this whole idea of having a projected deficit spending of $75,000, yeah, quite honestly, that concerns me.
So I welcome any member of the Financial Review Committee to share their thoughts and specifics. And Andy isn't here able to be here tonight, but he did share the one piece of information in regard to the proposed deficit of $74,950 equates to 5 years of available cash, and he expressed how he feels from their perspective that that's a conservative way of being able to manage the budget while still increasing the support for our staff, which is a substantial goal of this budget, is to try to get us more in line with the recommended standard there for staff salaries. And then the other, if you look, our current offering plate donations is coming in at about 7.7%. So I do know that they take a look historically at how they're coming in, and it is a conservative number at 5%. And that Andy has told me, and I told the council, that he's basically built this budget very conservatively based on where he thinks actually will be. Just as we had a proposed deficit of $52,000, for this year, we're coming in at 24 because of good management then and good giving on behalf of the congregation throughout the year. Additional questions or thoughts? Seeing none, the question then that's before the body is to approve the program of work as presented. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The program is approved. Thank you to everybody for their work and their thoughts there. We now will go into committee reports, and I know there's a document that presents those. Is that correct, Pastor? Or are they up here?
So it's
Board, right, Board of Elders. Jeff, back up, thank you. But that's not on a printed document, correct? It's just there. It is as well on print? Thank you. Oh yeah, it's in your agenda document.
And this is summary.
Jeff.
I'll make my report pretty quick here. 2 projects upcoming would be the new camera system in the sanctuary here. That funding has been approved, and it's looking like that'll be happening yet this year. Next item would be the security system for the cameras for both the church and the school and the ministry center. That has also been approved and is in early stages of getting that moving here. So that should hopefully happen this year as well. We have accepted the request to serve as the host congregation for the 2023 Synod Convention at the Wisconsin Center in Milwaukee. And that'll be next summer. That's not this summer, that's next summer. What that means is we are there as support. We will be leading the worship, support of ushers and some of the communion elements as well. That's an honorary thing. It's a more or less it's an honorary thing, so it's a good thing. And then again, we still have a continued need of ushers. We have a very faithful group, but could always use some more.
Questions for the Board of Elders? Seeing none, and this again is in your agenda document. It's the page numbered page 1. It's about halfway through page 1 on the bottom. We'll now turn over to the Board of Christian Day School and Tom Muir.
Thank you, Joe. Make this quick. A couple of things that we wanted to bring up that are being worked on. There's a 5-parent committee that has been put together for the SCRIP program. They're working currently on scheduling some training, and they're actually also looking to possibly make this a weekly option now instead of a bi-weekly, which I think would be actually pretty good. They want to get more people involved, like do online stuff, apps, things like that, so should be good. A couple of things the board worked on that have been voted on tonight: school budget, endowment fund disbursements, and also the technology IT policy. Would like to thank all the members of the call committee that were put together for Nathan Wingfield. New reading curriculum has been reviewed by Dr. Raski and staff. And our board discussed and approved that at our May meeting, and I believe that's going to be funded through Ian's funding. And lastly, I don't think Terry's here tonight, but today was actually his last day in the classroom. So just like to thank Terry for his years of service here at Trinity, and we wish him well in his retirement.
Questions for Tom? Seeing none, we will move on to the Christian Education Coordinator. I'm sorry. Ramona.
There are Bible classes available Sunday mornings and a variety of them throughout the week, in person and online. Pick one and go. We have a great church library. Talk to Chris Short if you want to know more about that. Please utilize it. There will finally be VBS at Lutheran Library again this summer. Please volunteer if you can. And any questions about Cradle Roll, Liz Eckblock, Stephen Ministry is coordinating.
Questions for Ramona? Seeing none. Evangelism. That's Pastor Zick, who's not here this evening. Pastor.
It'd be great if you'd click on the website and go to the directory. There's the password. You can put your picture with your name. It'd be really helpful for especially new members
to see who we are. There's a lot of empty ones, so I mean, you have to go in and do it, and I realize that that's sometimes difficult. But we'd love to have your picture in there's an online directory, and it's password protected. Also, 50 Easter lawn signs grace the lawns of members throughout Sheboygan. And Trinity's podcast is growing in its reach, and I think we're rated 653 in the religious broadcasts out of 2 million in some. So that's kind of cool. So we continue to get more people listening to us on our podcasts off our website. And by the way, we are all over the world with our services on Sunday. And so those upgrades and the cameras will be really helpful. We have somebody watching regularly from Germany, all over the country. Sometimes we receive gifts from people who just find us and send a check thanking us for putting it out there for them.
Thank you, Pastor. Any questions on evangelism? Next we'll go to properties and see Bill. Bob, sorry.
Yeah. The damage from the termites has been repaired. The biggest areas were in the chapel downstairs and in this transept stairway here. That's all been cleaned and looks pretty nice. We've contracted with a new trash hauler, and will be saving us several $100s a month, and hopefully better service. In the church kitchen, we replaced the stove and repaired the refrigerator, and we're still looking at options for replacing the dishwasher. We've contracted with O&W Communications to upgrade the fire alarm system in the church and the school, and they are still waiting for parts to complete the upgrade. We received a quote for repairing the church bells of $74,100. This would involve replacing the A stands that hold up the bells, adding new bearings so they can swing easily, replacing the headpiece clappers and springs in each of the bells, and also a new programmable digital controller that would control when they ring and how they ring. Any questions?
Lots of important stuff going on there. Human care, I know Matt is not able to be here tonight, but a lot going on in the human care area. Pastor.
I would just like to say they're doing phenomenal work in terms of reaching out to people in need. They put together, with the help of the school, I think, too, with goodie bags for homeless who come in, and we're able to give a bag of goodies and also information about where they might receive some extra help. And also Stephen Ministry is doing really, really well in reaching out to care receivers. There's also books that are sent out for anyone who is experiencing grief over the loss of loved ones, and it's been well received by the congregation.
Again, additional information in the document for you on human care. Now we'll go to Nicole on stewardship. Nicole.
The response rate for the annual commitment form was about the same as it was last year. It's down from pre-COVID years, so we're still looking at ways to increase the response rate. We did try to have an electronic option this year. You heard that we're very close to our goal for a balanced budget, so first, thank you very much for your faithful giving, and we're encouraging everybody to continue to prayerfully consider how you can support us in meeting that goal, because that allows us to be able to use undesignated funds then in other ways to support the mission of Trinity. And then our Enhancing Your Vision for Giving capital campaign. We kicked off a $500,000 capital campaign that includes some of the things that you've already heard about in the elders report. You heard about the new camera system for live streaming church. You also heard about security cameras for the church and school, so that's part of the capital campaign. Also, the playground is in very great need of being replaced, along with repaving the playground and replacing the fence. And then also, you heard about repairing the bells. That's another need that's part of that capital campaign, and replacing the dishwasher. So that's where that $500,000 amount comes from. With undesignated funds, we kicked off that capital campaign, and then we had the kids did a marching to meet our goal kickoff in March for the playground, and we've also had several congregation members that have committed or contributed to the capital campaign. So as of the last bulletin, we were at over $170,000 of that $500,000 amount. You're going to hear a little bit about a video that we're working on. Jen has been working on a video with Tom Kelly to promote the playground, and then Tom and I met with Pastor today about another video to promote the rest of the capital campaign. We have the ability to allow electronic gifts through credit cards as well, so we're going to pair the video with the opportunity for you to give right there after seeing the video. And I believe that's it.
Questions for Nicole? Yes.
How much did the children raise with the marching for the playground? I think there was a great campaign.
It was about 20,000.
So that was the calendar event, right? Yep. We'll probably go back to that in future years because it was a good program. Right. Thank you, Nicole. Next up is youth, and Brittany is not here. Pastor, anybody, any updates on youth?
We had great higher things, 140 in attendance. I was back up to normal. It was a great retreat, and there'll be another hires. Kids going this summer to the national one, July 26th and 29th at Valparaiso University. There's 8 youth and 3 adults attending.
Thank you. Next is finance. And again, Ken isn't able to be here this evening, but he's got a number of notes there for us. Thank you to everybody who helps us out with that weekly counting. Right. Yep. Lutheran Cemetery. Sue. I see Sue is here. And she's got a report. But Sue, do you want the microphone for a little bit? Sue and her committee have been putting in a lot of work.
Yeah, I have no idea. Hi, I'm Sue Terp. I've been on the committee for 3 years now, and I took over the lead role about a year ago. We are in need of a sexton terribly fast.
A sexton is what?
That is someone who takes care of our cemetery as far as selling crypts and lots and coordinates different things. And I've been doing it with the help of Deb Speck and Sue and a few other people. We've been trying to keep it going, but it's hard.
So it's a paid position?
It is a paid position.
Give some thought to an individual that way.
Right. We do have an ad we're putting together now for the Sun, which should be going in next week, Sue, and the Beacon, and then also back in our bulletin here at church. We're looking for somebody for about 20 hours a week, but it's been extremely busy since our sexton left in December, and this month alone we've had 10 burials. Last month we had 8. It's just, that's the way it is. So I don't know if 20 hours would be enough at times. Sometimes I don't get a phone call in a day, and other days I have 20 phone calls or more. We did get Oostake and Wilkie to replace 4 of our cameras. We added 4 more for the mausoleum and the grounds at the cemetery because there was some vandalism and we had some other issues that we had to address. We need volunteers we have almost 27 acres at our cemetery, and we put out the trash bins in the end of April, beginning of May, and people seem to like to go through there during their lunch hour and throw their bags of garbage out all over the place, except in the trash barrel. And we have tons and tons of sticks that I proposed to a couple of my grandkids today that if they picked up every stick, I'd give them a penny. And my grandson said, "How about 10 cents a stick, Grandma?" So, I mean, we need help with our lawn. We do have a service that cuts the lawn and trims the lawn, but we need people to come out and help. We had our flagpole repainted and a new flag. And the vets actually called me and yelled at me for not having a decent flag, but we couldn't get it down because it was stuck. The ropes were all tied together. It was a mess. But anyway, we need to replace our mailbox. Stan Sixel just replaced it a few months ago, and one of the trailers from up at Georgia Pacific drove back down and broke it. And we just had a new sign put on lot 9 of the cemetery, which is on the back side of the mausoleum, and one of their semis, we don't have proof, but they cracked the sign in half. We only had the sign for a week or two, and it was $1,400. So now we have to replace that sign, which has already been done. So, and we're being very conservative with our money, and we're trying to do a little at a time. We just had 7 more trees removed. Yes. Well, 4 of them were ash. The other ones were just rotted. They're over 100 years old. Our water system is really falling apart. And we turned off one of the mains up by the road where Wildwood and Lutheran are separated. And that one's going to just be off. It's broken in so many places they can't repair it, and we can't dig up to find where it exists. So eventually the cemetery will no longer have water. Not this year or next year, but it's coming because it's so antiquated. We just can't keep up with it. Does anyone have any questions? So anybody that wants to come and help me, just give me a call. I'd be very appreciative of it.
Just a comment, when I recruited Sue and Deb, I didn't mention all of this, what she's doing. She and Deb are doing a phenomenal job of getting the cemetery back to looking really, really nice again. We really, if you know someone who can help out as a sexton, they're basically doing that job while doing their other jobs. And they've really stepped up, so thank you very much for doing that. Otherwise, we'd be in really tough shape. So if you know someone who's interested in that, they could be flexible hours. And that
Yep,
kind of thing.
they are flexible hours.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, does Lutheran High still do their service day?
Yes, they did. They came in April, and we had 10 young men and 1 lady, and they came and helped for the day, and they really helped us out. We treated them to lunch, and I praised them up and down for at least an hour and thanked them, and they were very excited to do it. So we're going to have them. They helped us last year, and now we had them this year again. Different kids, but it was really great. So, thank you.
They did have to also, they called me and said, there's someone dead at the cemetery. And I said, of course there's someone dead at the cemetery. And then they said, no, there was someone actually, a homeless person in the cold, drank himself. And talk about not preparing them. They found this person with, what do you call it, stripped and everything because of, he was naked and died in the mausoleum. So
All right, again, thank you, Sue, for your report and for all your efforts out there. And really, I mean, again, give some thought to an individual that may have an interest in picking up 20 hours of work and helping at the cemetery. Because we've been searching for that position for, yeah, right. All right, I think we go to pastor's report, is that correct? Or Jenna, yeah, our principal's report, Jenna.
Okay, I have a few things that are on my report that maybe aren't. Oh, there they are. Okay, wonderful. So we had a wonderful confirmation service here just a few weeks ago, and a big congratulations to all of our confirmands. And today was our last day of school in the building. Tomorrow we have our closing picnic, so amazing that we are bringing another school year to a close. I know many of you were in attendance at our incredible Easter concert a few weeks ago where we partnered with Lutheran High, our adult and children choirs. It was absolutely outstanding, so thank you to all of you who were involved in the planning preparation, and for those of you who attended. That is not an event that you can typically attend in Sheboygan with Sheboygan locals and Sheboygan natives, and so what an incredible musical concert to be able to give praise to our Lord and also community outreach. A couple of school financial updates. The first rounds of EANS funding has closed, and so we spent all of our allocated funding. Technology hardware we talked about, that could also be used for cleaning supplies, sanitation supplies, and so at the end of the funding, we did some stocking up so that we can bolster our budget for this next year. So we probably shouldn't have to buy hand soap for 3 years, which is fantastic, and just made sure that we made some really smart decisions with some of that funding, along with updating Chromebooks, classroom devices, teacher devices, even going so far as to, we used it for our standardized testing. I could use it for next year. I could use it for Go Guardian. We used it for our firewall. And so over this year, and it will flow over into our next few budgets, over $100,000 of savings that would have been spent out of our pockets that has instead been used through EANS funding. In the second round of EANS funding, we have $137,000, so that will be used to complete the reading curriculum purchase and then to move into social studies. So over the last 10 years, our curriculum, we really had stopped updating curriculum for budgetary reasons, and so we have now hit a point where essentially every level of our curriculum needs to be updated. Online licenses have quite literally disappeared. Things are so antiquated that we can't get them anymore. And so now that we are in that rotation, the timing of the EANS funding was a huge boon to us as an organization, because we're able to, without them controlling what we purchase, we're able to use the funding to purchase. And so that will be incredible for our school as well. We are working on the video that Nicole Muth talked about. We already shot it on the playground. Thomas Kelly is in the editing stages right now. Our students were phenomenal. You wouldn't believe this, but they love being on camera. Shocking. And he did a great job of just getting some great shots of the playground to hopefully, like Nicole said, put that out there on our website, on social media, and then have that option to give right away. One of the things that we'll be exploring in the future, which I know we've talked a little bit about the voucher program tonight, but there is a separate branch of the voucher program. It's called the Special Ed Voucher Program. And again, this will come through to your attention a lot more next year, but the Special Ed Voucher Program is not income-based, it's student need-based, so it is given to students who already have an IEP or a plan of service. So our students here at Trinity receive speech, academic tutoring, and occupational therapy. And the goal of entering this program with the minimum number of students of, well, I should say, for us it would be a maximum, but there's a 4-student limit if you don't want to have to maintain a reserve balance. And the funding from that would be specifically to fund a 3/4 time resource teacher. So it would not be entering the program in order to bolster the operating budget, but to add a part-time position. So that's would be something that we'll discussing at the board level and then bringing to the council and to the voters about the potential of entering that program at a very minimal level in order to better meet the needs of our students. To make a long story short, the district has pretty dramatically shifted the guidelines that allow students to qualify for services. So what that means is it's incredibly hard for our students because our low students are not low enough. So what ends up happening then is that we have low students in our classrooms who require extra help that we can't get extra assistance for. You know that we run a very lean program. We don't have classroom aides. So we have teachers who are trying to meet the needs of students at dramatically different levels. And so what a part-time resource teacher would let us do would be to have a trained and qualified body in the building who fits with our mission and our organizational goals, who can be in the classroom or pulling students out to help aid in just kind of this increased need that we're seeing. And so that is just something that I wanted to put in front of you, and again, we'll have more information about that. Some exciting things for recruitment. Our full K class is at capacity. Our 3K class has 1 spot remaining, so if there's somebody who you know who wants 3K, tell them to come soon. I just got a phone call today, so that one might be full as well. We've had a wonderful amount of tours coming in from families, from the community, and quite a few transfers into our elementary school for next year, which is very exciting. And we would ask that you continue to share our school with positive word of mouth. That is always what brings in students more than anything else. Upcoming events, we have 8th grade graduation on June 3rd at Lutheran High at 7 o'clock. We would love to see you there to support our graduates. It is open to the public. And Mr. Jim Pingle will be our speaker for that evening, so it should be very enjoyable. In your prayers, we ask that you would keep Nathan and his wife Hannah and their 3 children in your prayers as they transition to Sheboygan. We're very excited for them to join our community. And then for our teachers and staff, our students have a half a day tomorrow, but our teachers are still here the next couple of weeks wrapping things up and in all sorts of fun meetings and curriculum trainings. We would ask that you keep them in your prayers as well. Any questions on the school? Yes, Ramona. Yeah, so it's Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools. So it was basically the CARES Act gave a branch of funding to parochial schools, private schools, but parochial included.
And then my other question is, 4K school, 3K has 1 spot. What is our capacity?
So technically 4K is at 22. So we have 21 registered. We have 1 spot that we always try to give a little bit of flexibility room for somebody who's maybe teetering between kindergarten and 4K, and our capacity for 3K is 20, so we are at 19 registered. Mm-hmm.
Additional questions for Jenna?
Sure. Yes, so Jeff and I serve as delegates on for Lutheran High, and so we just attended their most recent meeting and just have a couple of notes here for you, and we're happy to answer questions as well. So the 2022-23 projected enrollment is 213 students. Of those 213, they are predicting 93 voucher students. Their auction this past year raised $169,000 after expenses $122,000. They have plans underway for an all-school reunion in the summer of 2023. Most recently at Honors Night, over $2 million were awarded in scholarships to graduates at Lutheran High. And then on June 5th, they are also having a date to honor their staff members who are retiring or leaving Lutheran High at 3 o'clock. And we appreciate that they moved it to 3 o'clock because we have our celebration for Terry here right after late church, which we hope that you will join us for. And so from there, you can flow right on over to Lutheran High and celebrate those teachers as well. Any other questions about, I know we have some Lutheran High teachers here as well who might be able to answer any follow-up questions. Hand it over to Pastor Berg. I don't think I'm going to do the Concordia one.
My report is in the packet.
Maybe just to follow up on Jenna and on our earlier conversation about the voucher program, there's a lot of conversation that will be taking place both internally but also externally. So the voucher program is a program that's authorized by the legislature and the governor of the state. So that will be an issue of consideration in the upcoming elections in November. And then there's actually strong consideration by the legislature and some gubernatorial candidates to bring about basically what's called money follows the child in Wisconsin. So instead of your tax dollars being dictated as to where your child goes to school, there would be basically a voucher that would go to every child in Wisconsin, and their parents could choose what educational opportunity was best for their child or their family. So you may want to pay attention to that issue as well over the next couple of months here in Wisconsin. Pastor Meck.
You have our full report as well. We continue to get new members. So far this year, we have 22 new members, and we have lots more coming in. In fact, today, another couple, or yesterday, another couple came in. We continue to have people in the new member class, and lots of new transfers in as well. As Jeff mentioned earlier, Trinity accepted the LCMS invitation to be the host congregation for the 2023 LCMS convention. That's a real honor. I mean, we are not in Milwaukee, but they asked us to do it, and I think that's great. You should know Pastor Berg serves on the board of directors of Concordia University. They've had a lot of work lately, but they've come to get 3 candidates for the new president that they'll be interviewing, so that's excellent. You should know that I regularly serve as a chaplain for doxology retreats for pastors and church workers, and I also do on occasion retreats for pastors and elders based on my book. And that's been interesting to meet people and other congregations around the country. And Pastor Christoviak is a member of Trinity. He's also a pastor. He assists us in visitation of our shut-ins, and he does 10 a month. And that really is helpful for us because it just gets really busy. We have lots of shut-ins, right? We have a lot of people who we bring communion to every month. And I thought Easter was beautiful. Sam, it was just, the music has been phenomenal. It's just been fantastic. Any questions of us or Pastor Berg, anything to add? Past our bedtime, right? Okay.
And G is our cantor, Dr. Etherton. Any specific to share?
Hi, I have a written report. It's the very last page that you can read on your own, but I'd just like to express my appreciation to all of the musicians at the church. We're coming to the end of our season, going to have a little break here for summer. All of our children's and adult choirs, our handbell choir, all the teachers who assist with that, Mrs. Etherton, Mrs. Ekblad, Mrs. Gruben, each direct choirs that sing for services. And we just appreciate all of your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. That, I believe, I'm going to check to Kurt and Lori, make sure that we didn't miss anything. That takes care of all our reports and all of our needs for action. We'd see if there was any new business. Seeing none, we would then move for adjournment. Is there a second? There is a second. Under discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of adjournment indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will close with a prayer from Pastor Meck.
Please stand. While you're standing, I'd just like to thank our faculty and staff. What an incredible faculty and staff and a phenomenal church and school that we have here in Sheboygan. And also for all of the work that went in to keeping this thing going. I mean, it's, you see, it's $1.7 million that we have to take care of and make sure that it goes to making known the love of Christ in our community and world. So thank you for all of those who have been busy, active, volunteering, and doing so much in reaching out with the love of Christ to others. I'd like to just close, Dr. Etherton, if you would just lead us in the singing of the common doxology. We've lots to be thankful for.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.